Joining us is a lady who is no stranger to the Observer. Let me say a pleasant good evening to maritime attorney at law, Nyree Alfonso. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, Mikey, and good evening to your listening population there.
Thank you. And our viewers as well. Have no fear.
and your viewers, I beg your pardon, and your viewers. My bad.
It happens, don't worry. Well, a lot has taken place since we last spoke. The Minister of Energy has made it clear that a Nigerian lawyer for owners of the oil spill vessel has come forward, and government is suspicious. They have been contacted by a Nigerian lawyer representing the purported owners. Minister Young said there are also plans ahead to remove the barge from its location on a reef. And he gave that update recently. What are we looking at? I mean, there's some things that you had stated in the last interview, and you made it quite public, that there would have been areas that may still have oil. Oil is still draining out. Give us an idea, now that you're looking at it, what are some of the things that that was basically overlooked?
My suspicion from early on was that the oil that found its way on the shores in Tobago and surrounding areas was from specific compartments in the barge. So a barge is made up of what should be separate watertight compartments. So it might be 5, it might be 10, depending on the construction of the barge. I haven't looked at the specific details of how the barge is constructed, but one would expect she has a number of separate watertight compartments. So even though she's upside down, does not mean all of the oil is out. So the danger would be, if you attempt to move the vessel without removing the oil or in some way securing any remaining oil, you could cause a bigger set of trouble, bigger set of disaster.
Yeah, but Mr. Young made it quite clear. Mr. Young said, he said that currently they're scrutinizing these claims, having initiated inquiries to the Nigerian government about this Nigerian lawyer representing the purported owner. And he said, however, at this time there's reasonable suspicion related to this particular claim and correspondence. Why is this so complex? I mean, he said despite great efforts to date, all of the searchers have failed to locate the tug, which hasn't reactivated its automatic identification system since the date of the incident. I mean, many people say this has dragged on so long. What's going on? Is this something that they simply want us to ride out? And why is it so complex?
I mean, I don't believe it is as complex as people are making it out to be. We know where the vessel is registered, Tanzania. We know there are people listed as owners. We know there are people coming forward. There was, the international journalists, so I think they're like social media journalists, Bellingcat. I know they were collaborating with journalists in Trinidad and Tobago. And they had quite considerable amount of information by just using satellite technology. So let's just start from there. Tracking a vessel that is turned off what is called an AIS tracker. That's very difficult to believe, and I'll tell you why. There are many ports in the world that you can't come into a port with your AIS turned off. So this is a vessel. It needs water, it needs fuel, it needs food, it needs to replenish or replace its crew. So the vessel can't be going on forevermore without making a port of call. And if you're making a port of call, then you have to switch on your AIS. That is not the only way that you trace a vessel. You can also trace a vessel using satellite imagery, which is what Bellingcat did. So they know this is the footprint, this is what this vessel looks like, and they look for that vessel quite literally in the world. So all this is if journalists can track the vessel, why wouldn't the Trinidad and Tobago government utilizing not its resources, but the resources, the international resources, which they can tap in, not be able to trace the vessel? Bellingcat was able to trace shortly after the discovery of oil, leaking into the environment in Tobago, that the Solo Creed was sitting in the waters just off of Guyana. Now, if you could find it in Guyana, then you trace it from Guyana. Now, the reason it went back, why did it go to Guyana? That is where it was going. So I've always said, listen, the first port of call, the vessel did not reach her intended location, which is Guyana. She had an agent. The vessels had an agent in Guyana who had all the specifications and information with regard to this vessel. So that's your first starting point.
Right.
The consignee or the person who purchased this heavy fuel is also a Guyanese entity. Did we make inquiries, as we like to say, inquiries of the consignee of the cargo in order to discover, obviously you have contracts, somebody was contracted, somebody was paid. Let's start from there. Somebody was paid, somebody was contracted. Whether it was you paid up front, whether you had letters of credit, some payment arrangement was in place. These are just very, very simple investigation points that I say a government will have access to those things and not a private citizen like myself. Although, as I said, a bunch of investigative journalists were also able to find a lot of information out there.
And let me ask you, do you have to have this investigation completed before having access to the International Oil and Pollution Compensation Fund?
No, you would have to give I think this is what the Minister of Energy was trying to say. He said he had some hurdles to cross. So one of the things that the IOPC funds respond to is, okay, if we are going to make a contribution to the cleanup in your country from an oil spillage, tell us how. It's really called subrogation and insurance. Tell me how I'm going to get back that money. Tell me how you're going to pursue the perpetrators and wrongdoers to get that money, right? So I'll give you an example that is more, commonly understood by the general population. Your car, you're going down the road and a car hits you from the back and damages your car. You have fully comprehensive. You go to your insurance company and you say, okay, Mikey, we're going to fix your car, right? But when I finish fixing your car, I'm going to sue the person who hit your car so I can get back some of that money that I paid you because you had fully comprehensive. So the fund also works on that premise. I'm paying, it's a fund, right? The money doesn't come up from the bottom of the ground like oil, right? So people who import quantities or export or receive oil by sea transportation contribute to the fund. And therefore, you want your fund to be self-replenishing, so that I pay Trinidad and Tobago this, and then Trinidad and Tobago is able to track down the owners and make a recovery, right? And then those monies will go back into the fund. So, from my understanding, that's how the fund works. As I said, the fund would go bust pretty early on, right? Right. So, I think that is where Trinidad ran into some problems, or probably did run into some problems, because one, if their position is we can't find the owners of the vessel, what chances of recovering funds to replenish the fund?
Well, basically, so it's not going to be a cost to the taxpayers. That's clear.
Well, I can't say. I'm not a party to the negotiations, and the minister says that he spearheaded. So I don't know if they agreed to pay all. I heard reasonable sum. I don't know if that means all or only what is deemed to be reasonable. Who knows? I don't know if it's 100% of the cost. I don't know if it's 50% or 75%.
Yeah, reasonable cost could mean anything. The last thing we need is any sort of verbal acrobatics when it is that we're dealing with money, because, there has to be somewhere. Now, let me ask you, if this money is paid out, whatever the cost may be, are you penalized, or is it that you may have to make, in the future, larger contributions to it?
Well, when I got your call this afternoon, I said, look, just for kicks, let me just see if Trinidad, I know Trinidad is a member of the convention that established the fund, but are we contributing to the fund? Because you have to be a contributor to the fund. You have to be based on your annual movement of fuel quantities. You make a contribution. Well, I don't know if their site is not being updated, but I don't think we've made a contribution since 2022. All right? So I am sure that was an added hurdle that had to be climbed, where you had to convince the fund managers that mea culpa, we'll make it good. And, so I see two obstacles. So I can't say if this information has been properly updated, but certainly the site for the fund is reporting that our last reporting year period is 2022, whether by contribution or reports.
Right.
So I said, assuming that is correct, then I said you would have had to satisfy them that, listen, you'll be better in the future. And also that added hurdle of, what are the measures that are going to be put in place to recover what is being paid out by the fund.
Yeah, and I mean, we're being told as far as the spill, cleanup of the spill, but is there going to be a cost as far as salvaging and actually moving the vessel? Because that in itself, too, would be an added cost.
112.5%, including VAT. That is correct. So the salvage operation or the cleanup operation, or both, are ongoing. They haven't reached a high degree of finality. That will happen when the vessel is removed from our shores or scrapped out or taken away and no oil is leaking from that area. That will be your final conclusion.
Yeah, so again, so the meter is running. That's basically it.
Yeah, essentially the meter is running, and I don't think even the best experts in the world could tell you, look, it'll be $10 million more, it will be $20 million more, because if they haven't ascertained even what are the quantities remaining in the barge, if there are quantities, then, as I said, you're far, far away from where you need to be, because then you have to figure out, how do I not cause another incident by remaining quantities in other watertight compartments coming out?
Yeah. All right. So we look and we see how that comes about. I just want to shift gears quickly. You are a holder of a FUL, is that correct?
Yeah,
right.
30 years this year.
Right, and earlier this year you wrote to the police commissioner, Earl Harewood Christopher, about the recent changes and questioned the legality of the move. As far as the start of the year, the Commissioner of Police announced that all FUL holders had to renew their permits, including those that were issued FULs before 2004 when the Firearms Act was amended. And of course, you pointed out to Section 17.6 of the Firearms Amendment Act, which said FULs granted before the passage of the legislation in 2004 will remain valid unless terminated or revoked. Again, we're getting this perception that there seems to be a problem with, legal firearms rather than going after the criminal elements with illegal firearms. And that's not coming across good for citizens, because people want to believe that they have a fighting chance against the criminal elements. What are we looking at here as far as shifting the goalposts and making these new policies as they go along?
As I've written on several occasions in some of the Sunday newspapers over the years, it's always amazed me that every time there is an upsurge of crime with illegal firearms, the focus of the government appears to be legal firearms. I know it's counterintuitive. It absolutely doesn't make any sense, but it is the reality. So that this entire debacle of telling people to come and renew their firearms licenses, whether you were pre-2004 or after 2004. In fact, Mikey, we went to court. We took the commissioner to court. And I mean, just to add insult to injury, we took 6 people to court as examples of people who had it before, after, hunters, businessmen, people who had their licenses less than 3 years. So we did a sampling of 6 people. And when the commissioner reluctantly, and I have to say reluctantly, undertook not to touch these 6 people, right? Not to touch their firearms, their FULs, their ammunition, and so on. We asked, I thought, because we were the good guys, that, well, if these are legal points, as your lawyer has accepted, if they are legal points to be interpreted and determined by a court, then let us cast the protection of your undertaking to keep the status quo, to not touch anybody's guns, for everybody, for all FUL holders, until the determination of the matter. And I'm sure this matter is going to be determined, I very much feel, within this year. at the pace that Justice Rahim has put us on. And if that is the case, then there was no harm, in extending the protections pending the determination of a High Court judge. And the commissioner's attorneys point blank refused.
Yeah, but what stood out there? You said if Parliament intended the legislation to have retroactive effect on the FULs issued before the year 2004, then it would have had to plainly say so. And in any event,
that's first year law student stuff, in 19...
Well, exactly. And so it has to be clear that the language used was implied rather than expressed, and that in itself is bringing a cloud over the issue at hand.
Well, I mean, as I said, if you want, and I'll say if parliamentarians wish legislation to affect pre-existing rights, then you must do so in clear and unequivocal terms, whereby a person can clearly read the legislation and say, this legislation comes after I acquired my rights, in this case an FUL, and it affects me or it doesn't affect me. Simple. I'll say first year law student stuff that I would have learned in 1984.
Yeah.
So I do not understand how, what I said was lost in translation, appointed as a citizen, to ask the commissioner of police. I said, look, let's hold the status quo for everybody until we have a determination of the court, and to get a resounding no. Even when we identify to the commissioner that this is going to cause a proliferation of litigation where, I don't know, 100 people, 200 people, 3,000 people will come and clog up our court system. So why not stem that, stop that? And the answer, well, I have to be very fair and honest. The answer to that second request, pointing out the potential proliferation of litigation, was a resounding silence.
Understood. And let me ask you finally, how much do you think politics is playing out in this whole equation?
I'm 100% certain, until maybe a higher power comes to tell me differently, that the direction which not this commissioner and her predecessor took in relation to firearms is a dictated position.
Yeah.
It doesn't come out of the bowels of the police service necessarily. It's implemented by the police service.
I want to thank you so much, Nyree, for linking with us here this evening. Very enlightening, and we will be catching up on some of these issues as they develop. I want to thank you so much again. It's always a pleasure. And hey, you seem to be one of those targets. So all I can say is play it safe and keep up the good work.
Thank you very much, and a pleasure to be with you and your listeners and viewers, as I'm corrected, and I look forward to the next time.
Thank you so much.